John Hall down at Jimmy's shop. We're on the road. Jimmy built this guitar. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to show how to make a nut. Now, a lot of people spend a lot of time on nuts. How you decide to set up your nuts is up to you. This is a bone blank, and as you can see, it does not fit. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab the handheld camera, and I'm going to take this over to a belt sander, and I'm gently going to thickness this and shape it so that I can get it to fit into this nut slot. Now it's just about there. I probably only need to take about 10 thousandths off. And the other thing you want to be cognizant of is the nut slot can be on the barrel, or I should say on the flat side of the neck, or it can be on the slope of the headstock. So you want to make sure that you set that angle up first. Get your thickness, get the seating angle down here, and then worry about shaping. So, I know it's tight. Follow me. If you aren't very skilled at the belt sander, make yourself some practice ones with wood, just that you get a feeling of it. And you see how I have this on tape, so that I'm not going to shoot it across the room. And what I'm going to do is just gently apply weight with my fingers. I'm going to take off what I think I need to take off, and then do it a check. Okay, so just gently took that off. Now I'm going to check it to see if it fits. So it doesn't quite fit yet, so I know I got to do another sanding or two, and that's going to be the process, and I'm going to get it very close, and you'll see what I do to the final fit. I like my nuts to drop in here, and I don't want to have to press them in. I want them to fall in that they are friendly friction. I don't want them to be sloppy, and at the same token, I don't need them to be tight. Okay, and I got to put these on so I can see my joints. That looks good. Okay, I'm not quite down. I'm close. This side's fitting. This side isn't. Now, what I think I have going on here, perfect. Alright, that looks good. That slid in nice. Okay, it is fitting if I scooted it just off a little bit. Now, I got to trim it. So I take a sharp pencil, and I'm going to mark back here, and whoops, and right here. There. So now I know the width of my nut. The next thing I got to do is decide my radius. So I kind of freehand this. There's a lot of ways of doing it, so you know how you do it, how I do it are two different things. But now I got a pencil line. I'm taking my machinist scale, sliding it up my nuts, or sliding it up my frets to check the top of my nut. And that's just about perfect. I have my straight line just under that pencil mark. So now I'm going to sand my radius. I am going to sand the edges off. And the other thing you want to do, so you don't get confused, that's my base side. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, sand the radius, hit that part, and then I'm going to shape the nut. So my first part of shaping the nut, I'm just going to put a bit of a back angle on it, and then I put a bit of a radius that way, and then I'm going to sand a little bit of radius in it. So you can watch me do this on the belt sander, but it's no big deal, just shape it. It's just one of the ways that you can do this. Alright, so I've shaped my nut, roughly. It's not final shape, but it's close. This now fits into here nicely. I can take my straight edge and I can put this onto the nut, and I can see if I have to tweak the shape of the nut. Now I'm pretty close, but I know I want to take it down a little more, so I'm just making a mental note of the relationship of my fret plane to my pencil line. So I'm going to take a little bit more off of here, and I'll be back in a minute. Now, I think I have this roughed in. Yep, I'm happy with that. Okay, so I got my angle where I want it. I have, well, let's show it to you this way. So you can see I have my nut where I need it. The other thing I have is the length is just about right. I got to take a little bit off. I'm catching my finger here, just a hair. So I got my pencil. I can see my bit of a pencil line. I don't need to take much, but I want to get a visual reference as to what I have to take off. So I'm just going to hold that in there. Okay, that side's nice. Okay, the pencil line that I'm showing here, I got to remove. So I got to take a hair off. I have my nut. I'm not happy with the top shape yet, so now I'm just going to do a little bit of final shaping on this so I can get a nice little bit of a back radius on here and just make it look a little bit more finished, and then I'm going to do some sanding on it to just make it look classier. What I do is I'm just finessing the final shape, and I'm taking the sanding marks. So right now I'm using about a 220-320 grit. Now when I actually go to set up the nut slots, you got to think roller, not ramp. And I think I've mentioned that a couple of times in some of my previous videos. Now, you're going to be touching the nut when you play, so wherever you have a sharp corner, just break that corner. That way it's not so irritating when you rub against it. Don't touch the surface where the strings are coming out. We don't want to touch that. Okay, I like that. Now I'm just going to go through a couple different grits. And then I'm going to glue in the nut. And then I'm going to set up the nut slots. And I'm going to teach you my favorite method for setting up a nut slot. In theory, the bottom of the nut slot should be in the plane of the top of the frets. Now, that is in the relaxed state. Once you put the neck under tension, it will bow. And I don't concentrate so much on trying to get it dead flat. I'll show you how I work the nut slot. Okay, I think I can live with that. I'll show you how I work the nut slot for the strings. Okay, we're going to glue this in with a touch of tight bond, let it set up, and then we'll be back. Okay, here's a quick tip. How to glue in a nut. I just put a couple of drops of glue in there. You don't need a lot. You set this in, okay? I like to wiggle it a little bit, just that I get the nut, to bond into the glue. I'm checking at my joints. They're reasonably flush. Spring clamp. And then I like to put a spring clamp on this because the glue, in a way, if you think about it, it's kind of like a hydraulic fluid. And you want the nut to bed into the glue, so you just put a spring clamp on there and give it a good half hour, and then that will seat. And that's how I glue in a nut. Alright, I have made the nut. I made the saddle. Obviously, I'm sure most of you know how to make a saddle by now. I like my saddles to fit into the slot where I don't have to force them in, but I don't want them to be too sloppy. I just want them to be just, you can see it doesn't, there's very minute wiggle. Now I'm going to try to figure out what do I need for my saddle height. Now I don't have my nut trimmed. I'm going to put a straight edge on my first fret. Now generally I put weight on here of about 12 pounds to get the neck into that it thinks it's got, that it's strung up. So I know I'm going to be higher, or yeah, I know that my action height is going to be lower here because I don't have the stress on it. So I'm just going to take an educated guess. So I put it at approximately my first E string, and then I'm going to check what I'm seeing with my scale. And right now I am seeing 2, and when I say 2, that's 2/64 and 2/64. And you're right about a half of an inch here.
And which fret are you checking on, John?
I'm writing the first fret.
No, as far as the measuring, the 2/64.
I'm still doing it the 12th fret. The amount that it's going to be off is insignificant. I'm pretty sure, since this is going to be a 12-string guitar, that this will come up more than what we think it will. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of get an eyeball pushing down a little bit, and that neck is not going to move a hell of a lot. So, how do I set up the nut? This is a 12-string, and if we measure, we have 2 sets of holes. Okay, we have an octave hole and we have the natural hole. Most people put the octave on the lead. That's the way I like to do it. But we're going to take a look at the string spacing. About 2 3/16. So I can say that's about 2 3/16. Good, 2 5/16. So we have to remember this is a 12-string. You're going to set up 2 1 11/16 nuts is basically what we're going to do. One for the octaves, one for the naturals, for lack of a better term. So I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to come in about 100 thousandths from the edge. Okay. Now we're going to set one to the left, one to the right, and we're just going to get an eyeball of what we got. So we need a calculator. Okay, so the reason why I came to the idea of 1 11/16, this is a 1 7/8 width nut. So do 1 11/16 one way, 1 11/16 the other way. Alright, so now I'm setting this back up. I made a couple of marks, and I'm looking at approximately a 310,000 string spacing per set. Some people like to work on centers. That's the way I like to do it. Some people do spacing. I don't think it matters all that much. Just whatever technique that you're happy with, that's what you want to do. So here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, now I'm going to come back off of here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I got 6 pairs. So you can see how that laid this out, and it's given me approximately 100 thousandths spacing at the nut. So the next thing I'm going to do is we're actually going to start cutting nut slots. Alrighty. The tools that I'm going to use now, because I'm going to set the nut, are a set of nut files. I have all of the pins set. I have my saddle roughed in. And once more, I did the set from this side and the set from this side, so I got my spacing. And what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to put little marks. I'm going to just put little marks on the nut so that I can control the spacing. I don't want to get it cattywampus. And so, here we go. So I'm just basically putting the marks right on the pencil line. Now it's kind of like shooting pool. I'm using my finger to control the movement of the file to the marks. And the reason I do it this way is I've learned if I don't, I get the spacing off. And we want this reasonably good. Okay. Now, I'm going to start setting my nut slot here first. Now see, I'm kind of coming down, pointing towards the post of the tuner, and I'm letting that rock. See that? Now, you can have a nut gauge, but we're just going to work with the string. Okay, now, as you recall, I did my nut. And the easiest way I can tell you to do this is you set up on one side and you're basically doing a setup from the left for your string spacing and a setup for your right, and you saw how that laid out. So, without having some of my tools at home, I'm going to show you how to set up a nut using your actual strings. Now we're putting on a set of light strings, and I'm going to put my first string in. Now I started the nut slot and I just kind of roughed it in. Now I'm going to put the first string on. Okay. Now I'll pull my strings up, and I want to have, as you can see, about 4 fingers. I'm coming over the top, and I pull it tight, and I'm going to kink so I have a little bit of a loop. You can see that with the still there. So I have that set. I take my nipper, and I'm going to nip this off. I'm going to save this, and you'll see why in a minute.
You get enough of them, you can tie them together and make another string.
Now, once the string starts getting tight, I'm going to put it in the slot I made. Now, I can look at there, and I'm holding, basically fretting the 3rd string, but I'm getting the string off of the 2nd fret to the nut slot, and I'm looking at how much play I have here. And I probably got a good 15 thousandths. Now I can look at this, and I can take a measurement. I'm just going to take a look at what my action height is with this on here. And I'm going to take a reading there. And that's at 2. I can take some off of the saddle, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. Now I'm going to adjust this nut slot. So now that it's close to pitch, I'm going to back this off a little. Okay, I'm going to pull that over here, because I can lower the string. Now when I go to lower this, there we go. Remember, I'm kind of aiming for the post and coming down to my fretboard. And that, for lack of a better term, think roller, not ramp. And I'm going to say that ad nauseum. Now, this is my cutoff piece. It's 10 thousandths. I'm going to loop it, and I can slide that under the fret. My string's too high. So I'm going to take it down a little more. And I'm basically going to worry it down. And I got a good idea of about where I'm at. Okay, black down for the thin side. And you can see I just have that action. Much better. Now, still just a little high. And this will be the process for the other 11 strings. And I can't stress this enough. Make sure your nut slot is clean when you're done. Bingo. That's pretty darn close. Just a hair. So if I take it down and I'm 10/1000ths off that fret when I'm playing it, then you know you have a little room there just to do this tweak. Because the better you get this set up now, the better it's going to play, obviously. And that is really close. Now, let's see where we're at now. Just barely buzzing. So I'm going to let that ride and I'm going to set the rest of these up. So I got that. I'm going to do across here now, and I'm just going to start doing the pairs as I go. Now the one thing I'm going to do next, I'm going to change this nut in a minute. And I can eyeball where that slot is compared to the other one. Remember, the longest song ever played is called Tuning a 12 String. Now, since these are the same string gauge, I'm just going to jump that string over.
You still on the first one.
Yeah, even though I jumped it. That's pretty good. A little more.
So would you do the pairs, each pair at a time, or the
generally,
standard 6 and then the
I
octaves?
generally work the pairs.
Okay.
I generally work inside out, okay? I should say outside in.
So you'll do the low E after this.
No, I'm gonna do this pair, then I'll do the low E.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay.
I can live with that. Now, I will do the low E next, and the reason why I'm going to do the low E next, then I can take a reading of what my action height is, and I'll know about where to trim the saddle. So, and the bass C is, I think, a 52. Right here I have my mark, so I'm just going to take like a 20, 30, just a smaller file so I can start this in here so that the thicker nut slot is going to fit it. Now with the heavier string, I can use something different here to set the edge. And you can see I'm just not quite coming parallel to the fingerboard. Put this one in. And I want to do this one. I've got to do the octave. The octave's the first string. Now usually I'm going to take about 3 inches above the post for these strings. I don't do the Martin loop on these. I'll put it in about 1/2 of an inch, and I'm going to run that my hole is about 45 degrees this way. I leave about 1/2 of an inch, then I can put a kink in the string. Okay? Then that fits into the slot, or into the hole. I'm going to gently pull this as I bring the string around. And I personally like to wrap them, and then that comes over and grabs that loose end. Okay, now one slot. And I can see I got a good way to come down, but at least I got an eyeball. I can see where it's going. I'll pull that over and I'll put this over in the other notch so I don't have to handle it so much. And it's just a process of putting in, taking out till you get the slot where you need it. Okay. Any more. And it's a kind of like watching paint dry. And just take your time, because if there's one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to blow the nut and have to remake another one. There we go. I can probably go down a little bit, but what I want to do now is to get an idea what my action is going to be. Okay, this side's good. That side's a little high. So I'm going to take just a little bit off of the saddle, probably about a 64th or so. I'm not going to take a lot, just a little, because the action, if the action does anything, it's going to come up some. Alright. You want to put a little inconspicuous mark so you know where the base side is, so you don't get this flipped up. So I'm going to be back in a few seconds after I take just a hair off of here. Okay, now the bass string. I should lay these down with the numbers up. There we are. Now, because these gauges are heavier, I can use something to kind of eyeball where I'm heading. Don't rely on the file, because a lot of times that machining that's done on the file will actually have a bit of, you won't have a straight, the file may not be perfectly straight, so you can create yourself a little bit of a nightmare there. So again, I have my slot at about 45 degrees. Put about 1/2 to 3/8 of an inch, and I can kink that. gonna give it a little bit more off. Okay. Fingers ain't as strong as I think they are. There we go. I'm happy with that. So let's put this one in. So we now have 1, 2, 11, and 12. Now, when I do the hook, this is going to come down, around, underneath the string, and back. So I create a hook. The wound strings usually have enough frictional coefficient to keep them from slipping. The unwound strings don't have that luxury. So the hook will help you keep the guitar in tune better. Okay, now I'm checking to see my action height. Right now I am 2.5, just under 2. So we're falling into where I'd like to be. Now we're going to do 3 and 4. And I'm just basically working up the headstock because it just makes more sense. Okay. So I'm basically going to do 1, 2, 11 and 12, 3, 4, 9 and 10. That would be 5 and 6, 7 and 8. So I'm just going to go work my way up the tuners. Because if you start all over the place, it's just it's a pain in the butt. And this way you're just working up and you're just carrying out. Because if you start up here, this string's in the road, so you're just kind of planning your work so you're kind of ahead of yourself and not have to worry about getting stuff in the way. I do like to make sure the ball end is pulled up onto the plate, so I'm giving that a little yank. Now, this is a 17, so I'm going to go to the next one. Okay, so you saw my basic principle for setting up the nut. Now, I just got all the strings on. I'm looking at a nice 2-3 action. Now what we'll do is we'll let these strings stretch in and we'll be back in 3 days. I like what John Denver once said. When you have a 12 string, he said, you find a string that's in tune and tune all the rest to it.
This will be the first time the world has heard a size 5 Turs 12 string.
That sucker's loud.
Yeah. Now, I got this.
That I have noticed is the volume of the guitar usually has little to do with the size of the body. Little guitars can be just as loud.
Yeah.
Since this is all strung up, we have a guy that can play a guitar a hell of a lot better than me. So Glenn, get in front of the camera and
give it a try.
Give her a try.
All right. I don't know about 12 string then. I mean, let's give it a shot. Let's do a little picking. The action's good.